Hello and welcome to this week's episode of ShatterCast, joined by my wife Hannah and the Supreme Chancellor of Shattered Studios, Derrick Whitmore.
How am I Emperor Palpatine now?
Speaking of Emperor Palpatine, the person that he turned to the dark side, Anakin. When his mother Shmi passed away, he killed the Jawas, and it's just I think about Din Djarin and not just the Mandalorians, but the women DeLoreans and the children DeLoreans too.
I can't even respond.
Please go to the intro.
Send help.
And welcome back to ShatterCast. Thank you for sticking around after that wonderful intro. We are going to be talking about Mandalorian Season 2. And I'm going to open by saying lots of spoilers. We've all seen the entire season. We're going to talk, we may not talk about each episode in this segment, but we're going to be talking about everything from the first episode to the end of the last episode. So if you've not seen the final episode, especially of Mandalorian Season 2, finish that and then come back and watch this segment. And make sure you stick around. There is an end credit scene because Disney decided Marvel isn't the only IP that needs end credit scenes. So
yeah, we don't have an end credit scene.
We don't.
They do.
Because we're not owned by the mouse. But if Disney wants to make an offer, anyway, so all of that to say, if you have not finished Season 2 of Mandalorian, you probably don't want to watch this unless you already know everything because you've read a bunch of stuff and you don't care about spoilers, because there's going to be a lot of spoilers. The other thing I want to mention real quick is Derrick and myself, we're very honored to be on a Friends podcast. It's a bit of a long form compared to what we do here. It's about an hour and a half long. And that podcast is called Cinematic Doctrine. Our friend Melvin and Daniel, they both were on that with us, and we talked all things Mando Season 2. And the link to that is in the description. Check it out. Subscribe to their content. They're awesome. We love what they do. And we appreciate you guys for watching. All that to say, this is your last chance to leave the video if you have not finished Mandalorian Season 2.
You have been warned.
You have been warned. I'm going to give him like 3 seconds in my head before I say the most spoilery thing possible. Luke Skywalker shows up in the finale. Oh, there's so many things to talk about, so many things that we love. Not everything was perfect, so I want to make sure we're talking about the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. But as just a general check, real quick, general check. In like a sentence or two, how did you guys feel overall about the season 2 of Mandalorian? If you had to say, I think XYZ in like one statement of good, bad, everything, what would you say? We'll start with Hannah, and then Derrick, and then I'll finish.
I think one thing that The Mandalorian does well is, and obviously it's not the only thing it does well, but obviously it has this core plot that it's been running with the child. Mm-hmm. Now we have a name for Grogu, and that is the main plot, but they're really good at having subplots and other things going throughout. And there was a lot more of that in this second season with Bo-Katan and Boba Fett, and even a little bit with Mayfeld coming back, and Moff Gideon, and you just learn so much more, and it just built, I thought, really well on the foundation that the first season had set. I know that's more than 2 or 3 sentences.
Yeah, I was going to say, Derrick, you get a whole paragraph. Sorry.
I will just say, I think this is
Sorry. The main point of the question was, how did you like it? Was it a good reaction, a bad reaction, not just a summary of the season? So
a good.
Okay. All right, so all of those things, and you liked those things. That's awesome. Okay, Derek, go ahead.
Sure. I would say I think it is the best current version of Star Wars that we have been getting. So yes, I very much enjoyed it.
I think that's a fantastic and succinct way to put it. I think I'd agree with that. I would say I've said in other videos that I like all of the Star Wars movies. I will say that I have to think about it because it's a big thing for me to say this, but probably I enjoy this show more than any of the sequel movies. So that's pretty fair, I think. And I liked the sequel movies, but Mandalorian season 2 has especially been fantastic. The first season was great too, but oh man, who wants to just kind of jump in and talk about, I don't know, some moments from the season that stood out to them that you guys really liked?
Well, when you were talking about how you think Mandalorian is better than the sequel trilogy, which we know that you like the sequel trilogy, not to hate on that, but I saw a joke that, Ahsoka, who shows up in The Mandalorian, first live action Ahsoka, so exciting. When she decides not to train Grogu, someone imposed her face onto old Luke from Last Jedi, and instead of throwing a lightsaber over his shoulder, she's throwing Grogu.
Yes.
Aww.
It's Mandalorian holding Baby Yoda, and he's holding his hand out. And then the next frame where the lightsaber's going over the cliff, he took Baby Yoda, and Grogu was flying over the cliff.
But it was Ahsoka instead of Luke.
And it was
Aww.
Ahsoka.
That
was a good meme. That was A+.
But yeah, the Ahsoka episode was one of my favorites because I feel like it showcased her really well, especially for the people that haven't seen her in the animated stuff. And I think just her fighting style, you could get glimpses of her history there, but it didn't make you feel lost if you hadn't seen the other things that she was in. And I think it's one thing that this show did really well, as I alluded to before, is it set up a lot of great subplots that they can run with in the next season, especially since we don't know what's happening with Grogu because he's with Luke now. But yeah, her fighting with her two lightsabers and everything from that to her one-on-one duel with the Beskar spear, everything was just super cool about her and her episode.
Yep.
Very cool. I enjoyed a lot of it. I heard someone compare it to The Mandalorian being like a video game, where every episode he's going on side quests to fulfill different things, and he's also leveling up, getting his new Beskar spear and all this stuff. I definitely felt that way in the first season and a little bit way in this second season. I think it's the best version of kind of a sci-fi western that we've gotten in a long time. Probably since Firefly, so just really enjoy that. And this season, I really enjoyed the growth of the Mandalorian and his interaction with Grogu. He really became like a father to Grogu, and you saw that in many different ways. And just the ways that he was trying to protect him and trying to teach him and try to keep him from not eating frog eggs. All these things that parents do. I felt like the Mandalorian was doing. So yeah, that's probably some of my favorite parts.
I like it. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with both of you in kind of what stood out to you. So in the interest of saying something different, I would probably say episode 15 of season 2, or chapter 15, because that's what they call them. They call them chapters in this one, was the second appearance in season 2 of Mayfeld. And it's the episode where Mando and Mayfeld, they're inside that big juggernaut thing and transporting the highly explosive and fragile ore, fuel, something. I can't remember what it was, but it was they were transporting something that had been mined and was extremely volatile. And if the road gets too shaky, the thing blows up. They get attacked by a bunch of pirates. They eventually, the whole point is to get into this Imperial compound so that they can plug into this Imperial computer that's going to tell them where Moff Gideon is so they can get the baby back from Moff Gideon, right? And there's a lot of really interesting back and forth conversations between Mayfeld and Mando about crossing boundaries that we talked about in a recent video about, your convictions are XYZ, but Mayfeld makes a point. He's like, we all have lines we're not going to cross until things get messy. And, he's like, you say you can't take off your helmet, but now you're wearing a stormtrooper helmet. So what is it? Can you not show your face, or can you not take off your helmet? And there's just this interesting conversation they have about conviction and about the things that we live our life by, and how do we have these lines that we don't cross, and in what circumstances will we actually cross them. And in that same episode, they're having to connect to this computer, and Mayfeld can't do it because he would have to take his helmet off, or he had already taken his helmet off, but there was like people that would recognize him. So Mando goes in there and takes his helmet off, and there's other people in the room. And it's this moment where you realize that this thing that he has lived by his entire life, since being brought in as a youngling to the Mandalorian tribe that he was a part of, he was willing to cross that line to save Grogu. The relationship between him and the kid was so strong, and that kid was so important to him. Even his deepest held conviction, he was willing to step over. And I think there's a lot of conversations you can have about that, and the good and the bad about that as well. But that was the episode that made me think the most. And then I think the finale was just a wild ride of awesome the entire time. But that was the episode that made me think the most.
Cool. I think to that situation with Mayfeld, just real fast, I think the danger is, you can, again, we talked about this a little bit, again, the situational ethics, where depending on where I am, depends on how my ethics going to be. And I think that can be extremely dangerous. So I don't think that's good. But I do think Mando was reprioritizing what's important in his life. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So for me, that was the importance of that scene. It was showing how much he cared for the kid and how far he was going to go to try to do all that he can to rescue him. So it's not necessarily negative, but hopefully they'll find a good balance with that. So
agreed. I think that's a good point. And I think it kind of harkens back to the conversation where Mayfeld was like, we all have lines we won't cross until things get messy. But I think as just people living in a world, right? Not to be too meta in my memes, but we live in a society. Like as Christians, there are lines that we won't cross that are just black and white outlined in the Bible, things we're not supposed to do. And I think that if we don't know where those lines are, if we haven't taken the time to actually sit down and make a list of boundaries, whether we write it down or we're thinking about it or we're just studying God's word, and we don't take the time to actually decide, okay, what are the actual boundaries in my life, then it's easy to cross them in the moment because we didn't think ahead. We didn't consider the possibility of being tempted to do something that we know we're not supposed to do. And so we were ill-equipped in that moment to resist the urge to do whatever it is that crosses a line that we shouldn't cross. And I think is that what happened in that moment in the show? I don't think so. I think that you kind of nailed it, where he was at a point in his life where he was reevaluating his priorities, and he was making a decision there, a very intentional decision. Whereas if we don't think about it with intentionality and we don't know where those boundaries are, then it's easy to cross them accidentally because we don't know where they are, and we don't realize we've crossed it until we've already crossed it. And then that's a whole other can of worms. That's a great point. Very, very thought provoking. It's interesting how a Star Wars TV show that's really just a space cowboy show can make you think about topics like that. It's really deep.
Another pause. Oh, go for it.
Well, it also reminds me of there are many different instances throughout the episodes that throughout the season that tempt Din, or attempt to tempt Din, um, for what he keeps his focus on protecting the child and getting Grogu where he needs to be, or keeping him safe. Like, for example, Moff Gideon does an awesome job of this. Of like, I mean, he ultimately fails, but he's very manipulative and like trying to offer power through the dark saber, trying to think that maybe people are turning on the Mandalorian, or maybe making him doubt himself. And there's going to be a lot of things that come at you like that, that either tempt you to lose your focus on what's important, or make you doubt that you can do what you need to do, and keep those priorities where they are, the important priorities.
Yep. Well said. Derrick?
I was just going to jump back to another positive thing. I thought this season had a lot of fan service, and we talked about all the guest stars who came in, from Ahsoka to Boba Fett to so many other people. Just something for me, it was really cool to see inside of Boba Fett's ship and how it actually rotates when it's taking off. That's been like a question for many Star Wars fans. Like, when it takes off, do they just fall over? So just small things like that, I thought was just a great fan service for people who enjoy Star Wars and the lore. And it was cool that I feel in the first season they expanded sort of the Mandalorian lore. Second season we're kind of redefining that a little bit, but just even things like, again, Boba Fett's ship and other stuff like that, I think is one of the reasons why a lot of fans like this series, because it has some great characters, great Star Wars, but they're also pushing the lore a little bit, which is fun.
Yeah, along that, I love seeing some of the planets that we haven't seen yet, but I've heard of, like when they went to Mon Calamari, like getting to see that in live action was really cool.
Yeah, and Tython, and there were a few others as well. And I completely agree with both of those. Getting to see planets that we've heard the name of, that we got to see and spend more time in. It was one of the things we talked about in Derrick and I's appearance on Cinematic Doctrine. Another shameless plug. Check them out. Link in the description. We talked about how this show allows for you to kind of settle into Star Wars in a way that the movies don't really allow. When you go see a movie, they have to tell a complete story start to finish in like 90 to 120 minutes. You get a show and you get through 90 minutes in the first 3 episodes, sometimes 2 episodes. And so you spend a lot more time. And so that's one of the things I love about this show is in the episode, I want to say it was chapter 14, where they actually get Mayfeld to join them. Or sorry, not that. It was when Mando went to Bo-Katan and her crew and asked for their help. He goes into a tavern, and it's like an Old West saloon where like there's like a swinging door, and he steps in, and it takes 30 seconds from the time that like the scene starts before he actually says anything at the table. Like, they just take their time, and everything's slow, and you see him scan the room like an old Western. You see him slowly saunter over to the table. I mean, they're not in a rush. And that's one of the things that I love, is they don't rush through this stuff. They know that they can take their time, and they do. And I think that's wonderful. And getting to see more of Boba Fett was awesome. I kind of liked that we got the fake out in the first episode of season 2, where we think like, oh wow, it's Boba Fett right away. And then it's actually Cobb Vanth, and that guy is Timothy Olyphant, is the actor who I love. I've loved him since I want to say Scream 2, which is a movie that I don't really recommend to most people. It was like a psychological thriller about a serial killer. But he was the bad guy, and it was just awesome. Like, he was just a good actor. He was also, oh, that's right, he was in Live Free or Die Hard. He was the main bad guy in the 4th Die Hard movie. He was like the hacker. Like, I totally forgot about that. I'm sorry. Anyway, I really like Timothy Olyphant. He's a great actor. So I hope that we see more Cobb in season 3, even though he was only in 1 episode. They brought Mayfeld back. They can bring Cobb back. But yep.
Can we get into some of our challenges or
thoughts?
negatives for the season?
John's like, no.
No name.
All right. So some of the things I thought was a great season. So they introduced a lot of characters, and like from Ahsoka, Boba Fett, all these people, and as they were bringing it in, I was like, it's really cool. But sort of in some episodes, seemed like Mandalorian was taking a backseat in his own show, and I kind of felt like, man, they're introducing all these people. This feels like backdoor pilots or spinoffs. And then Disney had their showcase where we realized, yes, there are 10 episodes coming out. So it was cool to see them. I just don't want Disney to do that all the time. As we go to season 3, I got to introduce a bunch of new characters just to spin them off, so I just want them to be a little careful with that. The last episode, again, seeing Luke was such a fan service. I did enjoy it, and I really enjoyed it for the sake of Mark Hamill, who it's widely known he didn't like Luke's appearance in the sequels and how all that ended, his story ended there. So it's just kind of a fan service to see him brought back. The one caution I do have for Disney going forward in season 3 is one of the things I like about the Mandalorian is he's a well-trained hunter, but he's also just a guy in a suit sometimes, and so seeing him it took all he had to fight just one of the Dark Troopers, and that fight scene was great because of the power difference. And so I always get a little concerned when they introduce a bunch of powerful characters, all these like Ahsoka, or when Luke came in by himself, took out 10 Dark Troopers. Just going forward, I don't want them to do that too much, because one of the things I like about the show is that it is and it's weird to say, kind of relatable with the Mandalorian, just using his fighting skills and his armor to get the best. And then I could say some other stuff. There's some plot holes and some, why is Mando taking off his jetpack? Oh, because they don't want him to fly over to save the baby. Things like that. And why is this security device like the worst scanner ever, where you take off your helmet to scan if you're a person, but it doesn't check to see if you're the right person? Stuff like that was okay. It's for the plot. But some good things came out of it. My last big thing is, I love Grogu so much, and they've left season 2 in a point where they don't necessarily have to bring him back a lot for season 3. And if they decide to go that way, I think a lot of fans will be disappointed. So I'm just kind of curious how they'll take season 3. So I love season 2. I thought it was really good. Those are some of the things that more cautious, I would say, as we get into season 3, that they don't keep doing. What about you guys?
I think you make a great point there about not wanting it to just become a show that sets up other shows. It reminds me of, 20 years ago, we used to call them Monster of the Week shows. And that was when there's really no main plot that gets driven all the time. There's a ton of filler episodes, and it's who's the bad guy this week, and who's the bad guy next week, and who's the bad guy the week after that. It's just, there's nothing that really connects all of them. And so I think there is a risk of that happening. And with this show, only instead of Monster of the Week, it's who's the new character that they're trying to push a show for. So I really hope that they don't do that. And speaking on the finale with Mark Hamill, like you said, he wasn't super excited about, which is to say he wasn't happy with his portrayal in the sequels with Luke's portrayal. And I pulled up his Twitter because there was a tweet that he shared on December 31st in response to how everyone has been gushing over Luke showing up in the finale. And it was really touching. And so I just wanted to read so he tweeted this on December 31st, 2020. Mark Hamill tweeted this: "I'm a fan myself." So he's responding to a video that is a compilation of people reacting to seeing Luke Skywalker. And he says, "I'm a fan myself, so I knew true fans would love it. But to see them thrilled beyond belief with the exuberance of children, whooping it up, screaming in ecstasy, the tears of sheer joy, it's a roller coaster of emotions I'll never forget." And so it's just really cool, to remind ourselves that Mark Hamill is a real person. he is flesh and blood. He is a human being. And he's not an actor, he's a human who acts, right? He is a person. His identity is not Luke Skywalker. His identity is not an entertainer. He's a person. And so it's really cool to see how touched he has been by the overwhelmingly positive response to his appearance in Mandalorian, the finale of season 2. So
yeah,
yeah,
because I think for a long time we were trying to figure out who it was, and Luke didn't seem like an option because we totally forgot that the technology is there where we could still keep Mark Hamill.
It's a little uncanny valley when he was talking, but when he wasn't talking, it looked fantastic.
Yeah. I was laughing earlier when you said, what spinoff are they going to push this week? Because my first thought was, are we going to get a Frog Lady show?
I play a mobile Star Wars game called Galaxy of Heroes, and we all want a Frog Lady character.
She's the unsung hero.
She's capable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my criticisms are similar to Derrick's, not so much in the introduction of new characters, because I love all the characters that they've introduced. I think it's really exciting, but more so wanting to see more of Dan and his fightings, and I just keep thinking back to 2 scenes from season 1. The first one being when they're in the prison, and Dan just kicks butt with all of the other mercenaries that have turned on him, and just plays mind games with them. Yep. And messes with the doors, and it's just super cool.
That was that was probably my favorite episode of season 1, honestly. Yeah. That was the episode with Mayfeld too.
Yeah.
It was so good. So good.
And the other scene is when he goes to rescue Grogu after he gave him to the Empire, and he collected his reward. Just making his way through those hallways and kicking butt with all the Imperial people. And that was really cool because he had just gotten all the whistling rockets and all that stuff, and those 2 scenes I think really showcase how cool Mandalorians can be, because it's a whole thing, and people talk about how cool it is to see Jedis fight, but it's also really cool to see Mandalorians fight.
Yeah.
And I think there should have been more of that in season 2, in less relying on other people.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you think about fighting in Star Wars, you think about lightsabers and the Force. You don't think about a dude in Mandalorian armor literally just get suplexed by the bad guy. Mando gets thrown around a few times, and it's just a different kind of fighting. It's a lot more visceral and a lot more relatable than your lightsaber duels. I love lightsabers as much as the next guy. But it's pretty awesome to see just get Mando get thrown through a table, because you don't see that in Star Wars. So all of this is great. Talking about things we don't like, talking about the things that we love. Mandalorian's awesome. Ultimately, we all love Jesus more than Mandalorian. So Derrick, why don't you help us bring this to Jesus? Why don't you talk to us about our faith point?
Sure. As we were reflecting on the season, all of us were struck by how Mandalorian Din was so moved to protect Grogu, and how that relationship had grown, and how the Mandalorian we met in the beginning of season 1 is totally different in some ways from season 2. And the main thing was his relationship with Grogu. His love, his desire to protect this kid shifted his priorities and things like that. And as people in real life, there are certain milestones that we might hit that might totally shift our priorities, and kind of remind us that life isn't just about us and what we might want. We really are a community. And so we think about things like when someone gets married, or when someone has kids, or things like that tend to shift their priorities. So it's less on what can I get out of life, and more of how can I give life to others. And so as we were thinking about that, we thought that was an important faith point to remember. Life isn't just about us. It's not just about getting all that we can to be the most popular or the famous, or all the money in the world. Life truly is about loving and caring for others. And again, we see that played out well with the Mandalorian, how his whole shift happens to protect Grogu. And we see that played out in the Bible. Romans 12 is a great chapter and talks about a bunch of things. But at the very beginning, it says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. In Romans, Paul's laying out all that God has done for us, not just created us, but redeemed us, saved us, given us a hope, given us a future. And the proper way to respond to that is for our priorities to shift, for our priorities to just not be about living life just for me anymore. It's ultimately to live life in a way that pleases and honors God. And we know ultimately God wants us to live life in a way that really impacts and helps other people. And so just again, we thought, when you meet God and truly meet him, there's that opportunity to shift your priorities and shift your focus in life into something that's greater than you. And that can be an amazing thing. What do you guys think about that idea?
That's great. Hannah, you go first. Unless you're not ready. I just didn't want to.
I'm not ready.
Okay, I talk a lot.
I'm still processing.
I'm trying to be mindful of the fact that I talk all the time. I actually only have about one thing I want to add to that. And it's funny because I knew what our faith point was going into this, but this popped in my head while you were talking just now. And when I was in college, sophomore through senior year, I had a mentor, Dr. Voth, and we were talking about the concept, this really fancy word or phrase, spiritual formation. And what is that? And we were reading through a book on it, on Christian spiritual formation specifically. And in that book, it defined it very specifically. And there's 4 parts to the definition, but it's just a sentence. So all of you guys are going to learn right now what I learned about 8 years ago. Christian spiritual formation is a process of being conformed into the image of Christ for the sake of others. And all 4 of those parts are extremely important to understand. It's a process. It's not a one and done thing. It's going to take your entire life, right? You're being conformed, right? We're being formed. We're being changed every day, either closer to the image of Christ or further away from the image of Christ. There's one or the other, right? And so the third point is the image of Christ, because that's, as a Christian, that's what we should be focusing on, is being like Christ. But the last point is extremely important, that it's not for our own sake. It's for the sake of others. Because if you get the first 3 points and you completely miss the last one, you're a Pharisee. Everything is about your own spiritual growth, and it's about building up your own ego and puffing up your own chest. But a life of being a Christian, a life of following Christ, to be formed into his image, it's all about other people. The life of a Christian is a life of self-sacrifice. It's a life of selflessness. And so seeing Mando go from being a bounty hunter, where his entire life was about getting someone, putting him in jail and getting his payday and walking away, to having this encounter with the child, and suddenly his life is not about him anymore. It is drastically and permanently altered, and his life is now about protecting that child. And when we encounter Christ, that's when our life we realize that our life is no longer our own, and it's for other people, and that's a lot more fulfilling, honestly, to live like that. It's a lot more fulfilling.
So when I think about the transformation that comes with deciding to follow Christ, I think about 2 Corinthians 5:17, where it says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away; behold, the new has come." And I think about how, yes, you turn from your old ways as far as like repenting from sin and spending time with God and following his commandments, but you also start to change in the way that you start to exhibit the fruits of the Spirit, which fruits of the Spirit gets thrown around a lot as Christianese or jargon within Christianity. But really all it is are things that come out of a life of walking with God. Things like love, peace, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and gentleness. And those are all things that are good, and all things that are signs of being a new creation and having a new nature when you decide to walk with God and to follow him. And just like with, Mandalorian, it's not just suddenly everything is just about Mandalorian. Everything is just about the child. It's he, starts to see things in a new way, and he develops connections that he hadn't developed before, because he was just a loner before, and he starts to develop friendships, and the way that he interacts with people starts to change as well, because as much as his relationship with Grogu is him wanting to protect Grogu, but Grogu's making him rethink what's important and how he should interact with others, just from the innocence and the joy that this little child brings, this 50-year-old child brings. If that made any sense.
Perfect.
I think that's great, and I love what you just said, Hannah. And I think as John was talking, it made me think of something, a great analogy. John 3:16, most of us know it. For God so loved the world that he did something about it. He sent his son, Jesus, in the form of a child, to live life as we do, to grow up, and to ultimately sacrifice himself on our behalf. And John said how the Mando, his life was going one way, and then he encountered a child. And the same thing is for us. Our life is going one way until we encounter Jesus. And the Bible says God gives us each an opportunity to encounter Jesus. And we hope maybe even during the show that you are. And key thing, as Hannah was saying, once you encounter Jesus, you have to make a choice. Are you going to live life like you were before, or is that going to change your whole dynamic? And when you truly encounter Jesus, when you truly start to follow him and feel the love that he has for us and all he's done for us, it's going to change your impact and your relationship with other people. Again, as Hannah was saying, Mando started to have more compassion and was more willing to help other people because he was starting to see life in a different way as he was trying to take care of Grogu the child. And the same thing is for us. Again, the more we follow God, the more our desires, our passions, what's important to us starts to change. And so we just want to encourage you, if you haven't encountered the child Jesus, to please reach out and do so. And if you need help with that, let us know. Contact us. We'll be happy to walk you through that process.
100%. 100%. I think that is quite possibly the best note to end this episode on. And that is precisely why every time we finish, after I thank Derrick, Supreme Chancellor of Shattered Studios, my wife, Hannah, Supreme Chancellor of our household, and I thank you guys for watching the show, I always end by saying that we love you, but more importantly, God loves you. God, creator of the universe, he loves you. Really. We'll see you next week. Take care. Has resumed. The button has been touched. Things will never be the same. I don't know why I said it like that.
You guys have the blue gloves ready? All right, never mind. Let's keep going.
It has been pushed. Yo, Wizard Harry. I love how they reverse that. Like in memes, it'll be like, "You're a wizard, Harry," and then he goes, "You're a Harry wizard." Oh man.
Whatever the topic is, I just feel like, okay, I need a pun about frogs. Frog puns.
That's usually how I find the jokes that I start this show with. Like, I am not ashamed to admit that I went through pages of World of Warcraft puns back when we were reporting on classic WoW launching.
I choose to believe your jokes come original from you, John. That shall always be my thought.
Thank you.